She went in to clean and saw a crying baby, then realized he looked exactly like her late son. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that's going to tug at your heartstrings. Imagine walking into a house to clean, only to find a baby crying, and then realizing he looks exactly like your late son. Intrigued? Well, you're in for a wild ride. But be warned, grab some tissues because things might get emotional. Before we dive in, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy stories that make you think, and subscribe to Stories TH for more heartwarming content like this. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Now take a deep breath, sit back, relax, and let me take you on this incredible journey. Trust me, it's going to be a good one. The unexpected job offer. Samantha had always been an ordinary woman, leading an ordinary life. Her days were filled with mundane routines, taking care of her home, handling small errands, and working part-time as a housekeeper. But deep down, she craved something more, something to give her life meaning again. It had been 5 years since the tragic accident that took her son, David, away from her. Since then, Samantha had struggled with a hollow feeling in her heart, something that nothing could fill. The house felt empty, even though she still kept David's room intact, his toys scattered across the floor, and his pictures hanging on the wall. It was as if she was preserving his memory in every corner of the house, unable to let go. One afternoon, as she was sitting at her kitchen table drinking coffee and staring absent-mindedly out the window, her phone rang. The call was from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment, but decided to answer. "Hello?" she said, her voice a little hoarse. "Is this Samantha Thompson?" a deep voice on the other end asked. "This is Caroline Winters. I represent the Winters family. We're looking for someone to assist us with cleaning the mansion. Would you be interested?" Samantha blinked, surprised. She had heard of the Winters family, one of the wealthiest and most influential families in the city. They lived in a massive mansion on the outskirts of town, an area known for its opulent homes and vast estates. Samantha had never imagined she'd be offered a job at such a high-profile place. I don't know, she stammered. I've only ever cleaned smaller homes. Caroline's voice was warm and reassuring. Don't worry about it. We're looking for someone trustworthy, someone who can keep things in order. Your references checked out, and we're confident you'll do a great job. The thought of cleaning such a luxurious home made Samantha nervous, but she knew she could use the extra income. It wasn't just about the money, though. Something about the opportunity intrigued her. There was a certain allure to the idea of entering the world of the ultra-wealthy, even if just for a few hours each week. Perhaps it would provide a distraction from the constant pain of missing her son. "Okay, I'll do it," Samantha finally said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "Great," Caroline exclaimed. "I'll send over the details. You'll start tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll be there to meet you. See you soon." As the call ended, Samantha sat there for a moment, still processing what had just happened. A part of her was excited about the prospect of a new experience, but another part of her felt a familiar twinge of anxiety. What would it be like to step into the extravagant world of the Winters family? Would she feel out of place among their wealth and luxury? Later that evening, as she prepared for her first day, she found herself reflecting on the reasons she had accepted the job. Samantha wasn't the type to seek attention or spotlight. In fact, she had always shied away from the grandiose. But there was something about the Winters family that sparked a curiosity in her, something that tugged at the remnants of her past, a time when her life had been more full, more hopeful. Back then, David's smile had been enough to fill her heart with joy. Now, all she had were memories, and those, too, were fading. The next morning, Samantha drove to the mansion, her hands gripping the steering wheel with a mix of nerves and anticipation. As she passed through the gates of the estate, she couldn't help but marvel at the grandeur. The mansion stood tall and imposing, its white columns and manicured gardens creating an atmosphere of elegance and wealth. It felt like stepping into another world, one far removed from her quiet, modest life. Caroline Winters greeted her at the door with a bright smile, her polished appearance exuding sophistication. She was everything Samantha had imagined: tall, elegant, and composed. Samantha felt a sudden sense of unease. She wasn't used to being in the presence of such poised, affluent people. "Come in, Samantha," Caroline said warmly, ushering her inside. "I'll give you a quick tour and show you where we need the most attention." As Samantha walked through the house, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the opulence. The floors were made of marble, the walls adorned with fine art, and the furniture looked as though it belonged in a museum. The air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers, and everything seemed to gleam with perfection. But amidst all the luxury, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She didn't belong here. "This is where you'll be working," Caroline said, her voice echoing in the vast foyer. "We just need someone to tidy up the common areas, dust, and make sure everything looks neat. Nothing too complicated." Samantha nodded, trying to hide her discomfort. "I can do that," she said, even though her mind was racing. The idea of cleaning such an extravagant home felt like an impossible task. What if she made a mistake? What if she didn't do it right? "You'll be fine," Caroline reassured her, sensing the hesitation. "Don't worry about anything. Just take your time and let me know if you need help." With that, Samantha was left alone to start her first task. As she moved from room to room, dusting and straightening up, she found herself overwhelmed by the sheer size of the house. But it wasn't just the house itself, it was the loneliness she felt in this space. The vast emptiness, the coldness of the rooms, the quiet that seemed to press in on her from all sides. It reminded her too much of her own life after David's death. Everything felt empty, just like her heart. As she dusted the living room, she heard the sound of a baby crying from upstairs. It wasn't a sound she was used to. Babies didn't belong in places like this, did they? The Winters family had no children, or so she thought. Curiosity got the best of her, and before she realized it, Samantha found herself heading upstairs, the soft cries growing louder with each step. She paused at the top of the stairs, her breath caught in her throat as she saw the source of the noise. There, in a crib, was a baby, his face red from crying. But as her eyes locked on his, something strange happened. Her heart skipped a beat. The baby looked exactly like David. It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. But there he was, a boy with the same dark eyes, the same expression of confusion and sadness, the same soft features she had memorized for years. A million thoughts rushed through Samantha's mind as she stood frozen in place, staring at the baby. Was this a dream? Was this a cruel joke? Or was something far more profound happening, something that would change her life forever? Entering the mansion, Samantha stood motionless at the top of the staircase, her breath caught in her chest as she stared at the baby in the crib. The soft, fragile face before her seemed almost too familiar. She blinked, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Her mind raced, but she couldn't quite grasp what was happening. The baby's crying grew louder, as though echoing in the vast emptiness of the mansion. But to Samantha, it felt like a distant hum in the background. All she could focus on was the face staring back at her. She took a tentative step forward, her feet feeling as if they were made of stone. The baby, still crying, stretched out his tiny hands toward her, and in that moment, Samantha felt a tug in her chest, a strange pull that she couldn't explain. It was as if her heart had suddenly been ripped wide open, but at the same time, filled with hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "David?" she whispered, the name slipping from her lips before she could stop it. The sound of her own voice felt like a shock. It had been so long since she had spoken his name aloud, a name that brought with it both unbearable pain and precious memories. But as soon as the word escaped her, she realized it wasn't just the name that had slipped out. It was her entire heart, laid bare before this strange child. Could it be? Could it really be him, her son, somehow returned to her? She knelt down beside the crib, her hand hovering just above the baby's. His eyes, wide and filled with innocence, met hers. The crying stopped abruptly, as if the baby recognized her voice, or perhaps it was something deeper, something beyond explanation. A chill ran down Samantha's spine as she continued to stare at the child, her mind spinning in circles. She couldn't take her eyes off of him. The resemblance was uncanny. The same dark hair, the same small nose, the same wide brown eyes that she had spent so many sleepless nights gazing into. She could almost hear his laugh again, his tiny giggles from when he was a baby, filling their home with joy. Her hands trembled as she reached down to pick him up. He was light, fragile, just like David had been. She carefully cradled him in her arms, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. It was comforting, but also overwhelmingly heartbreaking. Was this a cruel joke? Was this some kind of twisted illusion? She could hardly breathe as her fingers stroked the soft fuzz of his hair, the sensation almost too real to be true. The silence in the room was deafening. Samantha's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake, a trick of her tired mind. But no matter how much she tried to rationalize it, everything about this moment felt impossibly real. "Who are you?" she whispered to the baby, though the question was really meant for herself. How is this possible? The baby blinked up at her, his eyes wide, unblinking, as if trying to communicate something Samantha couldn't understand. And in that moment, something strange happened. The room around her seemed to blur, the grand walls of the mansion fading away. All she could focus on was the child in her arms. The deep connection she felt stronger than anything she had ever experienced pulled her in, her mind unable to separate the boy in front of her from her late son. Just then, the soft sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Samantha's heart skipped. She quickly stood up, almost instinctively, cradling the baby tighter to her chest, as if protecting him from an unseen threat. The footsteps grew louder, and before she could react, Caroline Winters appeared in the doorway. She looked taken aback for a moment, her expression shifting to one of confusion. "Samantha, what are you?" Caroline began, but her voice faltered when her eyes fell on the baby. The baby was still gazing at Samantha, his tiny hands reaching out to Caroline. Caroline's expression softened, but there was a strange flicker of something in her eyes. For a brief moment, Samantha caught a hint of something, an emotion. Perhaps a recognition that Caroline quickly masked with a professional smile. "Ah, that's little Ethan," Caroline said, her voice smooth but with a touch of unease. "He's been staying here while his father is away on business. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned him earlier. He's been crying all morning, but it looks like you've calmed him down." Samantha nodded, but her mind was spinning. Ethan? That wasn't the name she had expected to hear. Ethan. It was an ordinary name, a simple one, but it did nothing to ease the storm brewing inside her. How could this child, who looked so much like her David, be a stranger to her? And why had Caroline not mentioned him before? I didn't realize, Samantha stammered, still holding Ethan in her arms. Her voice felt distant, as though she were speaking from another world. He looks so much like my son. Caroline's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second before she smiled again, more warmly this time. "It's a common thing," she explained. "You know, babies often remind us of people from our past. It's all in the way they look. It's just a coincidence." Samantha forced a smile, but her mind wasn't focused on Caroline's explanation. She wasn't sure she could even hear it anymore. All she could think about was the baby's face, the familiarity of it, the overwhelming connection she felt. Could it really just be a coincidence? Or was there something more to this child? Something that Carolyn wasn't telling her? Caroline's voice cut through her thoughts. "Well, I think you should go ahead and finish up the cleaning," she said, her tone suddenly more businesslike. "I'll take Ethan for now. Thank you for calming him down." Samantha hesitated, still unsure of what to do. She reluctantly handed the baby over to Caroline, her hands shaking as she did so. As Caroline cradled Ethan in her arms, Samantha watched her closely. There was something off about the whole situation, something that didn't sit right with her. She felt like she was on the edge of uncovering something bigger than herself that could change everything she thought she knew about this place, and maybe even about herself. As Caroline turned to leave with Ethan, Samantha stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She looked around the room one more time, the mansion's walls closing in around her, before shaking herself out of the trance she was in. What was going on here? And why did this baby, Ethan, remind her so much of her own lost son? Part 3. The sound of crying. Samantha's mind raced as she continued with her tasks, each motion robotic and mechanical. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan's face from her thoughts. The warmth of his tiny hands still lingered on her skin. It was as though his touch had rekindled something deep within her, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in years. As much as she tried to focus on the cleaning, every creak of the mansion, every echo of footsteps, only reminded her of the strange encounter with the baby. She dusted the living room table with careful precision, but her thoughts remained scattered. The emptiness of the mansion seemed to press against her. It wasn't just the silence, it was something deeper. It was as if this house, so grand and magnificent, was built on secrets. And she couldn't ignore the most pressing one of all, the child that had reminded her so much of her lost son, David. The hours seemed to drag on as Samantha worked her way through the mansion. She tidied up the study, rearranged pillows in the sitting room, and polished the windows. But each task felt like it was in a different world from the one her mind kept returning to. How could Caroline, the elegant woman who seemed to have everything under control, be so nonchalant about Ethan? Why had she kept him hidden away in this grand house without telling her more about him? And most importantly, why did the baby feel so familiar? By the time lunch rolled around, Samantha had finished most of her work. Her mind, however, was still tangled in a web of confusion. As she gathered her things to leave, she passed by the staircase once more. And as if the house itself had been holding its breath, she heard it again, the sound of crying. The unmistakable guttural sobs of a baby echoed from upstairs. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure why the sound affected her so deeply, but it did. Her feet moved before she could stop them, and in a moment of unconscious decision, she found herself climbing the stairs once again. The cries seemed louder now, more desperate, and her concern only deepened. Maybe Caroline had been too busy to attend to him. She would check on him one last time. When Samantha reached the top of the stairs, she hesitated at the hallway. The cry was coming from a room near the end of the corridor. She could feel her chest tighten with each step, the pulse of anxiety growing stronger. It wasn't just the sound that unsettled her. It was the feeling in the pit of her stomach. It was as if the house itself was calling her to this room, urging her to uncover something. She couldn't quite explain why she felt this way, but the sensation was undeniable. The door to the nursery was slightly ajar. Samantha stood still for a moment, listening to the cries that seemed to pierce the silence of the mansion. Without thinking, she pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw the small crib in the corner of the room. And there he was again, Ethan. He was crying harder now, his tiny fists clenched tightly as tears streaked down his face. His soft whimpers echoed through the room, each sob pulling at Samantha's heart. For a split second, she froze. Something deep inside her stirred, something she hadn't felt in years. The pain of losing her son, the unbearable emptiness that had defined her existence for so long, surged through her like a tidal wave. The grief was raw, unfiltered, and all-encompassing. But then, as if the universe had sent her a signal, she noticed something else. Ethan's cry faltered for a moment, and his eyes locked with hers. In that instant, everything around her seemed to blur. The room, the house, the world. It all disappeared, and for one brief, fleeting second, it was just her and the baby. And in his gaze, Samantha saw something more than just a helpless infant. She saw the ghost of her son, David, looking back at her. Her heart shattered all over again, but this time, there was something else. A glimmer of hope, a sense of connection that she couldn't deny. This wasn't just a coincidence, was it? This was something more. The room felt colder now, and Samantha instinctively took a step forward. But before she could reach the crib, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. It was Caroline again, her heels clicking against the floor as she approached with purpose. "Samantha," Caroline called softly, but there was a hint of urgency in her voice. "What are you doing here? Ethan's fine. He just needed some attention." Samantha turned to face Caroline, her heart still racing. "I heard him crying. I just wanted to check on him," she said, her voice trembling more than she intended. She quickly glanced back at Ethan, who had stopped crying and was now staring up at her with wide eyes. It was as though he understood the weight of the moment, the unspoken connection that lingered between them. Caroline's gaze flickered between Samantha and the baby, her lips curling into a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's fine," Caroline repeated, her tone a little sharper this time. "He just gets fussy sometimes. It's nothing to worry about." Samantha nodded, though a part of her felt unsettled by Caroline's reaction. There was something about the way she said it, something cold and distant, as if Caroline was hiding something, as if she was trying to push Samantha away from the truth. But what truth? Samantha couldn't quite grasp it yet, but something told her that the answers were just beyond her reach. Samantha hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "Do you mind if I hold him for a minute? Just to calm him down?" Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment Samantha could have sworn she saw a flicker of something else in her expression, a mixture of reluctance and uncertainty. But then Caroline's smile returned, albeit a little more forced. "Of course," Caroline said, stepping aside. "Just for a moment. But he's fine now, really." Samantha gently lifted Ethan from his crib once more, cradling him in her arms. She felt the weight of his tiny body against hers, and once again, that overwhelming sense of connection washed over her. The tears in his eyes had faded, and in that instant she realized just how badly she wanted to protect him, to keep him safe. The world outside this mansion seemed to fall away as she held him close, as if they were the only two people left. But as she looked up at Caroline, her mind was filled with a single, undeniable question. What is going on here? The baby's face. Samantha stood there, holding Ethan in her arms, the feeling of his tiny body pressed against hers, more comforting than anything she had experienced in years. His small hands gripped the fabric of her shirt, and he gazed up at her with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. It was as if he knew her, recognized her in a way that was impossible to explain. For a moment, the world outside this room seemed to vanish, and there was only her and the baby. In his eyes, she saw flashes of her son, David. The same warmth, the same innocence, the same unspoken connection. Samantha closed her eyes, allowing the emotions to flood over her. The loss, the heartache, the loneliness, all of it felt both distant and present at the same time. She had buried those feelings for so long, pushing them down deep within herself, but in this moment, they resurfaced with a vengeance. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How is it possible that you look just like him?" The words hung in the air, but Ethan, innocent as ever, just stared back at her. He made a soft cooing sound, his lips curling into what might have been a smile. Samantha could almost swear that he was responding to her, as if he understood exactly what she was thinking. Suddenly, Caroline's voice broke through the haze of her thoughts. "You should put him back in his crib," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "He's fine now. Let me take care of him." Samantha felt a pang in her chest at the suggestion. She hesitated, reluctant to let go of the child who had become a lifeline, a connection to her lost son. But she forced herself to comply, handing Ethan over to Caroline's waiting arms. As Caroline took the baby, Samantha noticed the same faint, unreadable expression on her face that she had seen earlier. Caroline's smile was polite, but there was something guarded in her demeanor, something she couldn't quite place. It made Samantha uneasy. "Thank you," Caroline said, her voice soft but detached. "I'll make sure he's settled. You can finish up the cleaning downstairs." Samantha nodded, but as she turned to leave the nursery, she felt a wave of unease wash over her. Something wasn't right. The way Caroline had spoken to her, the way she had kept so many details hidden about Ethan, it didn't add up. Why hadn't Caroline mentioned the baby before? Why was she so protective of him? Samantha made her way back downstairs, her thoughts swirling. She had always prided herself on being an observant person, someone who could read the subtle signs others missed. But now, all of her instincts were on high alert. She needed to know more. She couldn't just leave it at this. There was something about Ethan, something about this entire situation, that was too important to ignore. As she worked her way through the remaining rooms, her mind was consumed with questions. Who was Ethan really? Why had he appeared so suddenly in the Winters family's life? And most importantly, why did he look so much like David? When Samantha finished her work, she gathered her things and prepared to leave. But before she could make it to the front door, Caroline called out to her. "Samantha," she said, her voice casual, but with an undercurrent of something more. "I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to talk to you about something." Samantha turned, her pulse quickening. "Of course," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's on your mind?" Caroline smiled, though her eyes seemed to darken just slightly. "I just wanted to let you know that we may need more help around here. The Winters family has a lot of moving parts, and I could use someone I trust." She paused for a moment, studying Samantha carefully. "You've done a good job today, and I'm sure there's more work for you here if you'd be willing." Samantha felt a sense of unease tighten in her chest. "More work?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Caroline's smile didn't falter. "Yes," she said, her tone almost too smooth. "You've shown that you're capable, and I think you could be a great asset, but there are things that need to stay between us. No need to involve anyone else." Samantha's mind raced. Something wasn't right, but Caroline's words lingered in her thoughts. The offer sounded too convenient, too calculated, and yet, part of her, despite the growing sense of discomfort, wanted to say yes. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to discover the truth, to uncover the mysteries of this house and the child who seemed so familiar. "I'll think about it," Samantha said, forcing a smile, "but I can't make any promises." Caroline nodded, her expression softening. "Take your time. There's no rush, but just know that we'll be expecting you here again soon." As Samantha left the mansion and drove home, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had stepped into something far bigger than herself. The baby, Ethan, was still fresh in her mind. His face, so hauntingly familiar, was burned into her memory. The way he had looked at her, the way he had calmed in her arms, it was as if he knew her, as if he recognized her. Her heart ached with the thought. Could it be possible? Could Ethan truly be her son? Or was it all just some cruel trick of fate, a bizarre coincidence that her mind had created to fill the void David had left behind? When she arrived home, Samantha found herself standing in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty walls. The silence was deafening. She hadn't even realized how lonely it had been until now. David's room, once filled with laughter and life, now sat untouched. His toys, his clothes, everything he had left behind, remained just as it had been. And yet, no matter how hard she tried to focus on the past, it felt like everything was slipping away, replaced by the memory of a child she barely knew, but somehow felt so connected to. Samantha sank into the couch, her mind still reeling. She had to know the truth. She had to find out who Ethan really was. The answer lay somewhere in the depths of the Winters family's secrets, and she wasn't about to stop until she uncovered them. The mystery of the baby's origin. The next morning, Samantha woke up with a sense of unease that lingered like a fog around her. The image of Ethan's face was still vivid in her mind, his dark eyes, the same ones that had haunted her in dreams, staring at her as if he were her own. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, and yet, something about him called to her, something she couldn't explain. The more she tried to rationalize it, the more confused she became. Could it be possible that her son, David, had somehow returned? Or was this simply her grief clouding her judgment? The more she thought about the Winters family, the more her suspicions grew. Caroline had been too careful with her words, too guarded. There was a sense of secrecy around Ethan that she couldn't ignore. Why had she never mentioned the baby before? Why had Caroline been so insistent that Samantha keep her distance from him? There was clearly something more to the situation, something that Caroline wasn't telling her. Samantha had already made up her mind. She needed answers. The only way to get them was to dig deeper, to confront Caroline and the Winters family head-on. She wasn't going to let this mystery slip through her fingers. It had been years since she'd felt anything other than numbness, but Ethan, this baby, had awakened something inside her that she couldn't ignore. She spent the rest of the day planning. She needed to be subtle, careful. She couldn't afford to raise any suspicion. The last thing she wanted was to be dismissed as just another housekeeper. She had to get close to Caroline, to the Winters family, to the secrets they were hiding. And most importantly, she had to learn everything there was to know about Ethan. Was he really her son, or was he someone else entirely? The following week, Samantha returned to the mansion. This time, she was prepared. She kept her head down, focused on the work, and waited for an opportunity to present itself. She cleaned the grand foyer, dusted the bookshelves, and polished the silverware. But her eyes were always on Caroline, always watching for any sign that she was hiding something. By mid-afternoon, the mansion was eerily quiet. Caroline had gone out, leaving Samantha alone with the house. It was the perfect chance for her to explore. She had seen a small door at the back of the hallway on her last visit, hidden behind a set of curtains. It seemed out of place, like a part of the mansion that was rarely used. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she decided to investigate. Samantha walked cautiously down the hallway, her footsteps muffled against the plush carpet. She reached the door and turned the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Her heart raced as she pressed her ear against the wood, but there was nothing to hear. No movement, no sounds, just silence. She tried the handle again, this time with more force. It clicked open. The room beyond was dark, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. As Samantha stepped inside, her eyes adjusted to the low light. The room was cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and what looked like forgotten heirlooms. But what caught her attention wasn't the dusty antiques or the cobwebs in the corners. It was the large, old-fashioned crib in the far corner of the room. It looked out of place, as if it had been hastily shoved to the back of the room. Samantha's heart skipped a beat. She approached the crib, her hand shaking as she reached out to touch it. The crib was well worn, the paint chipped in places, but it was clearly used. It looked like a baby's crib, one that had been loved and cared for. A wave of dizziness hit her as she knelt beside it. This room, this forgotten space in the mansion, felt like it held a secret that had been buried for far too long. She took a deep breath and scanned the room for any clues. The walls were lined with shelves, some of them filled with old photographs, others with books and trinkets. As she moved closer to the shelves, something caught her eye, a photo album, its leather cover worn with age. She pulled it from the shelf, careful not to disturb anything else, and opened it slowly. The first few pages were filled with pictures of the Winters family. Caroline as a young woman, the family's lavish vacations, portraits of their opulent lifestyle. But then, near the back of the album, something caught her eye. There, tucked between two pages, was a photo that made her blood run cold. It was a picture of a woman, someone Samantha didn't recognize, but there was something familiar about her. She had dark eyes, similar to Samantha's own, and in her arms, she was holding a baby. The baby's face was obscured by the angle of the photo, but the woman's gaze was unmistakable. She was looking directly at the camera, but her expression was somber, as though she were hiding something. Samantha's pulse quickened as she studied the photo. There was something about it that felt wrong. Why had Caroline kept this hidden? Why was it tucked away in a forgotten album buried beneath layers of family history? The more Samantha stared at the photo, the more it unsettled her. She couldn't shake the feeling that this woman, and the child she was holding, had something to do with Ethan. Just then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Samantha, what are you doing here?" Caroline's voice was sharp, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. Samantha froze. the photo album still in her hands. She quickly closed it and turned to face Caroline, her heart racing. I was just cleaning up," Samantha stammered, trying to steady her breath. "I found this album and I thought it might be something you'd want to keep in the main house." Caroline's eyes narrowed, her lips pressing together into a thin line. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Samantha could feel the weight of the silence hanging between them, the tension thick in the air. Finally, Caroline spoke. "Put the album down," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "And make sure you finish the work I've given you. We don't need any distractions." Samantha nodded, slowly placing the album back on the shelf. Her hands shook slightly, but she tried to keep her composure. Caroline turned on her heel, not waiting for a response, and walked out of the room. Samantha stood there for a moment, the photo album still heavy in her hands, 1,000 questions swirling in her mind. This was it. She was close to uncovering the truth. She could feel it. But what was the connection between the woman in the photo, the baby in the crib, and Ethan? She didn't know yet, but she would find out. There was no turning back now. The unspoken truth. Samantha's hands were still trembling as she returned to her duties. The photo album now tucked under her arm. The weight of what she had discovered, no, what she suspected, was like a storm inside her, brewing, but still unspoken. Caroline's cold gaze, her abrupt tone, it all pointed to something bigger than Samantha had imagined, something hidden deep within the mansion. She couldn't push away the gnawing feeling that Caroline knew exactly what she was looking for and was trying to keep her away from it. Her mind raced with questions as she cleaned the large dining room. Why had Caroline tried so hard to keep her away from the album? What did the woman in the photo have to do with the Winters family? And most importantly, who was she holding in that picture? There was no denying that the child in the photograph resembled Ethan. It was a face she'd never seen before, yet somehow it was familiar, like a faint echo of something she couldn't quite grasp. As the hours passed, the house began to feel more and more oppressive. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft sound of her cleaning supplies. She couldn't shake the image of the photo, the woman who seemed to be hiding something behind her eyes. The mystery was deepening, and Samantha was determined to get to the bottom of it. When Caroline returned that evening, her demeanor was noticeably different. Gone was the polished exterior, the controlled calm she always wore. Instead, there was a weariness in her eyes, an unease that seemed to mirror Samantha's own. She had returned earlier than expected, her footsteps echoing through the halls as if she were trying to outrun something. "Samantha!" Caroline called from the doorway, her voice tinged with a strange urgency. "We need to talk." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. She had been expecting this moment, the confrontation she'd known would come. But now, standing before Caroline, she found herself torn. She had questions, so many questions, but she wasn't sure how much of the truth Caroline would reveal, or if she'd even admit to anything at all. "Of course," Samantha replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She set down her cleaning supplies and followed Caroline into the sitting room, where the atmosphere was heavier, more tense than usual. The flickering fire in the hearth cast long shadows across the room, but it was the look in Caroline's eyes that held Samantha's attention. Caroline stood by the large window, her back to the room, staring out into the dark night. "You've been asking questions," Caroline said, her voice low, almost regretful. "I know. You've seen the photo, haven't you?" Samantha's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected Caroline to bring it up so directly. The woman in the photo, was she really who Samantha thought she was? Was she connected to Ethan? Her thoughts spun, but she forced herself to focus, to remain calm. "I saw it," Samantha said quietly, stepping closer to Caroline. "And I think I have a right to know. What's going on here? Who is the woman in that picture, and why does Ethan look so much like my son?" Caroline finally turned around, her face now pale, her expression unreadable. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for something that had been building for a long time. For a moment, she said nothing, and the silence between them grew thick, oppressive. "I didn't want you to know," Caroline said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want anyone to know. Samantha's pulse quickened, and she stepped forward, her voice firm. What do you mean? What's the secret? Why are you hiding this from me? Caroline's gaze dropped to the floor, her hands clasped tightly together. She looked as though she were searching for the right words, but the silence stretched between them, heavier than the thick curtains that hung in the room. Finally, Caroline lifted her head, her eyes meeting Samantha's. The woman in the photo, Caroline began slowly, was my sister, Eliza. She was your son's mother. The words hit Samantha like a punch to the gut. Her breath left her, and she took a step back, trying to process what Caroline had just said. For a long moment, the room seemed to spin around her. Eliza. Ethan's mother? That couldn't be true. It didn't make sense. But the way Caroline was looking at her, the way she said it, it had the ring of truth. Samantha's mind raced, her thoughts fragmented as she tried to make sense of it. You're saying that Ethan is David's brother? Samantha's voice was barely a whisper, as if she couldn't believe her own words. That Eliza was his mother? Caroline nodded, her face etched with grief. Yes, but it's not as simple as that, she continued, her voice strained. Eliza disappeared several years ago. No one knows what happened to her, not even me. She had been different after the accident. She was never the same, and one day she just vanished. Samantha's head was spinning. It felt like the ground beneath her had been ripped away, leaving her struggling to stay upright. Eliza, Ethan's mother, had been David's mother too? It was all too much. The pieces didn't fit, and yet somehow they did. I don't understand, Samantha said, shaking her head in disbelief. If Eliza disappeared, then why is Ethan here? Why is he in this house, with you? Caroline's eyes grew distant as she turned away, looking out the window again. Ethan. He was left in our care. After Eliza disappeared, we found him. He was just a baby. And Samantha, I believed, that he had been left here for a reason. But we couldn't tell anyone. We couldn't risk it. Samantha felt her heart race as she stepped closer, her voice trembling. What are you telling me? That Ethan is my son's reincarnation? That he's somehow tied to David? Caroline shook her head, her voice breaking. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I've always thought there was something about Ethan. Something familiar in his eyes. It's like he's come back to us. And I'm scared, Samantha. I'm scared of what might happen if anyone finds out the truth. The weight of Caroline's words crashed over Samantha, and she could feel her knees weakening. Ethan, David, Eliza. It was a tangled web of family secrets, loss, and mysteries that no one, including her, had ever truly understood. But one thing was certain now. The truth was out there, and Samantha was determined to uncover the rest of it, no matter where it led. Confronting the past, Samantha stood frozen, trying to absorb the words Caroline had just spoken. Each sentence seemed to unravel a new layer of the tangled story, but the truth was still elusive. The connection between Ethan and her son David was undeniable, but how could it be possible? How could Ethan, this mysterious child, be connected to her son, who had been gone for so many years? Caroline was staring at the floor now, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the windowsill. The weight of the truth seemed to hang in the air, thick and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. I never wanted you to know, Caroline continued, her voice cracking with emotion. The family. We've been hiding things for so long. I don't know how much longer we can keep it hidden. Samantha's mind was still reeling from the revelation. Eliza had disappeared. Her sister, Ethan's mother, after the accident that had taken David's life. But if Eliza had been involved in David's life in some way, how could Caroline have kept all of this a secret? And more importantly, why was Ethan here now, in the mansion where her life had been turned upside down? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Samantha finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped closer to Caroline, her gaze piercing through the veil of secrecy that had surrounded this family. "Why keep all of this hidden? I deserve to know the truth." Caroline's face twisted with guilt, and for a moment Samantha thought she might break down. But instead, she straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. "Because, Samantha," she said quietly, "I was afraid. Afraid of what would happen if you found out. Afraid of losing Ethan. Of losing everything." Samantha took a step back, the weight of Caroline's words sinking in. "Losing everything?" she repeated, incredulity lacing her tone. "What does that mean? You were hiding him from me. From David's memory. How could you think that was right?" Caroline turned sharply, her face hardening. "You don't understand. Eliza didn't just disappear. She left Ethan behind. She left him with us, and I've always believed that maybe he had a greater purpose, that he might be a part of our family's future." Samantha's chest tightened as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. But the picture they formed was almost too much to bear. Eliza had left Ethan behind, but there was something more in Caroline's words. Something she hadn't said aloud. Something that Samantha now understood with a cold clarity. Caroline had been protecting Ethan, yes, but in doing so, she had kept Samantha in the dark about the truth. "Do you think Ethan is some kind of replacement for David?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling. She wasn't sure where the question had come from, but it escaped before she could stop herself. The idea seemed ludicrous, yet there was a part of her that felt a strange pull toward Ethan, as if he might be a link to the child she had lost. Caroline's expression faltered, and for the first time Samantha saw a crack in her composed facade. "No, I never thought that," Caroline said, shaking her head slowly. "But I do think there's something special about him. Something that connects him to the past, your past, my past, and Eliza's past." The silence that followed was suffocating. Samantha could feel the tension in the room, the weight of years of secrets and lies pressing down on both of them. Caroline's eyes were filled with regret, but also with something darker. Something that told Samantha that there was still so much more to this story, things Caroline wasn't saying, and that was the problem. Samantha had always believed that in order to heal, you had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. But here, in this room, truth seemed to be something Caroline had carefully hidden away, buried beneath layers of half-truths. "I don't know what to think anymore," Samantha murmured. "You say there's a connection, but I don't even understand it. Why do I feel this way about Ethan? Why does he look like David?" Caroline took a step forward, her expression softening. "I don't know either, Samantha, but sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. You've felt the connection, haven't you? The way Ethan looks at you, the way he calms when you're near. It's not just coincidence." Samantha swallowed hard, trying to steady the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She had spent so many years grieving for David, for the loss of her child, and now she was faced with the possibility that the child who looked so much like him could be standing in front of her, alive. Could Ethan somehow be the son she had lost, returned to her in a different form? It was almost too much to process, but the pull toward him, the deep connection she felt every time she held him, was undeniable. "But that doesn't explain everything," Samantha said, her voice trembling as she looked at Caroline. "Why would Eliza leave Ethan here? And why would she just vanish? Why did you keep him here without telling me? What are you really afraid of?" Caroline's face hardened again, and Samantha knew she had hit a nerve. For a long moment, Caroline said nothing, but when she finally spoke, her voice was low, barely audible. "There's a secret," Caroline whispered, her gaze flickering nervously toward the hallway as if someone might overhear. "A secret about Eliza, and about Ethan. I wasn't just protecting him from the world. I was protecting you." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. "Protecting me?" she repeated. "From what?" Caroline hesitated, the words hanging in the air, heavy with the weight of everything she had yet to reveal. I don't know if you're ready for the full truth, but I will tell you this. Ethan is not just the son of Eliza. He has ties to the Winters family that you wouldn't believe. There's a reason he looks like David. There's a reason he's here. Samantha stared at Caroline, the room spinning as everything she thought she knew began to unravel. There was more. So much more. And now, the real story was just beginning to unfold. The secret unraveled. Samantha stood there, trying to process Caroline's words, but it felt like everything she had known was slipping through her fingers. There was a secret, a deep hidden truth about Ethan that Caroline was now hinting at, and the more she said, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to move further apart, leaving her with more questions than answers. "Tell me, Caroline," Samantha said, her voice hoarse, her throat tight. "What do you mean by ties to the Winters family? What's the secret you're talking about?" Caroline's face was pale, the strain of years of secrecy written across her features. She glanced around the room as if afraid someone might be listening, before taking a deep breath and speaking in a voice that barely rose above a whisper. "It's not just about Eliza," Caroline began slowly, her hands trembling as she clasped them together in front of her. "It's about the Winters' legacy. There are things, secrets, buried deep within this family's history that go beyond wealth and power. Ethan is connected to that legacy in ways you can't imagine." Samantha's pulse quickened. She stepped forward, desperate for clarity. "What are you saying? Is Ethan part of some family inheritance? Is he tied to the Winters' fortune?" Caroline shook her head, her eyes clouded with the weight of whatever she was about to reveal. "No, Samantha, it's not about money. It's about something older, something that goes back generations. Ethan, he's part of a bloodline that this family has tried to protect and conceal for years." The air in the room seemed to thicken as Caroline's words hung between them like a storm on the horizon. Samantha's mind raced. What could Caroline mean by bloodline? The Winters family had always been known for its wealth and influence, but this was something deeper, something ancient. Samantha could feel her heart pounding in her chest, a sense of dread settling in her stomach. Caroline continued, her voice now trembling with emotion. "Ethan is not just Eliza's son. He's connected to the very foundation of this family, to its power. Eliza didn't just leave him behind because she couldn't care for him. She left him behind because she knew what he was. She knew what he represented." Samantha's mind reeled. Every word Caroline spoke felt like a puzzle piece, but it was a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. "What do you mean, what he represents? You're saying Ethan is more than just a child?" Caroline's face twisted with pain. "Yes, more than just a child. He's the key to something much bigger than any of us. The Winters family has protected him because he holds the answer to the family's survival, to its future. But that's something Eliza never wanted him to know. And she knew that, eventually, this day would come. The day when Ethan would be exposed to the truth." Samantha's head spun, trying to make sense of the words tumbling out of Caroline's mouth. A key to the family's future? A secret that had been hidden for generations? She couldn't breathe. She had lost her son, but now she was faced with a child who had the same face, the same eyes, and was tied to secrets that stretched far beyond what she could understand. "So, what now?" Samantha asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as she struggled to find her footing in the middle of the storm Caroline had just unleashed. "What happens to Ethan? What happens to us?" Caroline took a long breath, her eyes filling with a mixture of fear and regret. "I don't know what will happen next. But I do know that you have a choice. Ethan is connected to you. I can see it in the way he looks at you, the way you feel drawn to him. You have the power to decide his fate, to decide if the truth about this family is going to come to light." Samantha's thoughts were like a storm, swirling and crashing. But one thing was clear. She couldn't turn away from this now. Ethan was a part of her past, whether she understood it or not. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that perhaps He was the key to understanding everything that had happened. Her son, David, her grief, and now, this strange new connection to the Winters family. "I need to see him," Samantha said, her voice steady, though her heart was still pounding. "I need to see Ethan. I need to understand what this all means." Caroline hesitated, but then nodded. "He's upstairs," she said quietly, her gaze heavy with meaning. "But be careful, Samantha. There are things you don't know about him, things you might not be ready to face." Samantha didn't care about the warnings. She needed answers, and no matter how dangerous or unsettling they might be, she was ready to face whatever truth lay ahead. She made her way upstairs, her footsteps slow but determined. She had to find Ethan. She had to know if the child she had held in her arms was truly the same child that had been her son, or if there was something more sinister behind the mysterious legacy of the Winters family. As she reached the door to the nursery, Samantha's hand hovered over the knob. She felt the familiar wave of hesitation, but it was different this time. There was no turning back. She was already too deep into the mystery to stop now. Samantha opened the door. Ethan was in his crib, his big brown eyes looking up at her as though he had been waiting for her. The moment their eyes met, something shifted between them, something deep and unspoken. The connection she had felt before was stronger now, undeniable. But even as she gazed down at him, holding him once more in her arms, Samantha knew one thing with certainty. The truth she was about to uncover would change everything. She wasn't just facing the truth of the Winters family, but the truth of her own heart, and of the life she thought she had lost forever. "Samantha," Caroline's voice called from behind her, but Samantha didn't turn. She couldn't. She was already lost in Ethan's gaze, and somehow, deep down, she knew that this child, this mysterious, haunting child, was the key to everything. The unanswered questions. Samantha stood still, holding Ethan in her arms, her heart pounding against her chest. The connection she felt to him was overwhelming, as if their bond had always been there, hidden just beneath the surface. She couldn't tear her eyes away from him, the child who looked so much like her lost son, David. The realization that he was somehow tied to the past, to a legacy she couldn't yet understand, made her feel both hopeful and fearful. The questions swirling in her mind were too much to contain, and she had no idea where to start. Ethan's big brown eyes looked up at her with a mix of curiosity and trust, as though he knew she was the one who could help him unravel this mystery. The soft cooing sounds he made filled the room, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. Samantha gently rocked him in her arms, her mind racing. She needed answers, answers that Caroline had only begun to hint at. But how much of the truth was too much? How much was she prepared to face? Caroline stepped into the room, her footsteps heavy, and her voice barely above a whisper. "Samantha, you have to be careful," she warned. "I told you before, there's more to this than you realize. Ethan is not just connected to your past, but to everything this family has tried to protect." Samantha turned slowly, still holding Ethan tightly. "What do you mean by that, Caroline?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I can feel it. This connection between me and him, it's undeniable. But what are you not telling me?" Caroline sighed, her gaze falling to the floor as she ran a hand through her hair. The tension in the room was thick, and Samantha could feel the weight of years of secrecy pressing in on her. Caroline had always been so guarded, so careful about revealing anything. But now, Samantha needed to know more than ever. "Ethan," Caroline began, her voice soft but filled with sorrow. "Ethan is more than just a child to this family. He's tied to a legacy that we can't escape, a legacy of power, influence, and darkness. It's not just about your son, David, or about your grief. It's about what this family has done to protect itself, to preserve its future." Samantha's stomach twisted as she listened. Caroline's words were cryptic, but the gravity behind them was clear. The family's legacy wasn't just a matter of wealth, it was something much darker. Samantha's mind struggled to piece together the fragments of what Caroline had said. Could Ethan really hold the key to something that could change the course of the Winters family forever? Could he be the one to reveal all the secrets that had been buried for so long? "You keep saying there's more, Caroline," Samantha said, her voice laced with urgency. "What is it? What are you hiding from me? From him?" She glanced down at Ethan, who seemed to sense the growing tension in the room. He gazed up at her with innocence, his tiny hands reaching out toward her, as if trying to comfort her. Caroline's eyes softened for a moment as she looked at the baby, but then her face hardened again. "It's not my secret to tell, Samantha," she said quietly. "It's Ethan's. He's the one who will reveal the truth when the time is right. But I can't keep hiding him. Not from you. Not anymore." Samantha's chest tightened at Caroline's words. "So you're telling me that Ethan knows something? That he's the one who holds all the answers?" Caroline nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving Ethan's face. "Yes, but it's not something he can consciously understand. There's a connection between him and the Winters family that runs deeper than anything you could imagine. And if you want to understand the truth, you'll have to help him. Help him remember what he is." Samantha felt her pulse race at the weight of Caroline's statement. Help him remember? What did that mean? How could she help a child, her child, if that was even possible, remember something he didn't know? The thought was overwhelming, but it also lit a spark inside her. She was so close to understanding the truth. She could feel it in her bones. "I don't know what to do, Caroline," Samantha said softly, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know how to help him or how to even begin to make sense of all this. But I have to know. I have to understand. For David, for Ethan, for all of us." Caroline walked closer, her footsteps heavy with emotion. "I know this is hard, Samantha, but there's a reason Ethan is here. A reason that goes beyond just being part of the Winters family. He's connected to something ancient, something that has been hidden for centuries. And when the time is right, he will show you the way." Samantha's heart pounded as she looked down at Ethan, his eyes wide and unblinking. His little hand rested against her chest, and she felt an overwhelming sense of love for him, a love that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. He was her son, in some way, and she would protect him with everything she had. She would uncover the truth, no matter how much it scared her. "You're right," Samantha whispered. "I don't know what comes next, but I'm not going to stop. Not now. Not when I'm so close to understanding what happened to David and what Ethan really is." Caroline didn't say anything. She just nodded, her face unreadable. She knew that once Samantha made up her mind, there was no turning back. The path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But Samantha had no other choice. The truth was out there, and she was determined to find it. As Caroline stepped back, leaving Samantha alone with Ethan, the air in the room seemed to shift. It felt like something was changing, like the universe was aligning to reveal a secret that had been buried for too long. Samantha looked down at Ethan again, his eyes filled with a wisdom that belied his young age. The connection between them was stronger than ever, and she knew, deep in her heart, that he held the answers to everything she had been searching for. The door to the nursery creaked softly, and Samantha turned to see Caroline standing in the doorway, watching her. There was a moment of silence before Caroline spoke, her voice softer than before. "Be careful, Samantha," she warned, her tone grave. "The truth will change everything, and once you know it, there's no going back." Samantha nodded, the weight of her decision settling over her like a blanket. She was ready to face whatever truth lay ahead, ready to help Ethan find his way, and ready to unlock the mysteries of the Winters family once and for all. But as she looked down at Ethan, she couldn't help but wonder, would the truth set them free, or destroy everything they had ever known? The secret that could destroy them all. Samantha stood at the threshold of the nursery, her heart pounding with uncertainty. Caroline's words echoed in her mind. The truth will change everything. What if the truth was more dangerous than she could handle? What if the family legacy, what Ethan represented, was something that could unravel everything she thought she knew about her life, her past, and her son. But deep down, Samantha knew there was no turning back. The pull she felt toward Ethan, the connection between them, it was real. There was something undeniable about him. He was part of her story, part of David's, and if she didn't uncover the truth now, she might lose her chance forever. Ethan stirred in her arms, his little fingers gripping her sleeve as he let out a soft coo. His innocence, his warmth, was a stark contrast to the storm of questions that raged inside her. How could such a small child hold the key to unraveling a mystery so vast and ancient? She gently placed him back in his crib, taking a moment to look at his peaceful face before turning to face Caroline, who was still standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. The tension between them was palpable, as if they were both waiting for the other to make a move, to break the silence. "What is it that you're not telling me, Caroline?" Samantha asked again, her voice quieter this time, but firm. "You said there's something Ethan has to remember, something that will help me understand everything. What is it? What does he have to do with this legacy you've been hiding?" Caroline stepped into the room, the air growing colder as she approached. She looked down at Ethan for a moment, her face softening as she gazed at the child. Then she looked back at Samantha, her eyes dark with a mix of fear and regret. "I didn't want you involved in all this," Caroline confessed, her voice tight. "But I see now that you're already too deep. Ethan, he's not just a child. He's the heir to something much bigger than you or I can understand. The Winters family has been guarding this legacy for generations, and it's not just about wealth, it's about power, control. There's a reason our family has always been at the top. It's because of what we protect, what we've kept hidden." Samantha's mind raced as she absorbed Caroline's words. The Winters family had always been wealthy, influential, but now she was beginning to realize it wasn't just the fortune that had kept them in power. There was something darker, something more dangerous behind it all. Caroline continued, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Ethan's connection to the family goes back centuries. He carries a bloodline that's tied to everything the Winters family stands for. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that he doesn't know who he truly is, and neither do you." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about? You're telling me that Ethan doesn't even know his own history?" Caroline nodded, her eyes filling with sorrow. "Yes. Ethan was born to be the one who would unlock the family's full potential. But there's something that happened that changed everything. Eliza, his mother, she knew about it. And she left him behind because she knew the dangers of what he could become. She knew what the Winters family wanted him to do. And she couldn't let that happen." Samantha's heart was pounding in her chest. "But why leave him here? Why didn't Eliza take him with her? Why didn't she tell me what was going on?" Caroline sighed, looking weary as she collapsed into a chair by the window. Eliza knew the truth about Ethan. She knew that if he stayed in the family, he would be groomed for a purpose that was beyond her control. She loved him too much to let that happen, so she left him, hoping that he would find his own path. But that path, it's been marked for him. And now, Samantha, you have to decide. Will you help him fulfill it, or will you try to protect him from it? Samantha stood motionless, her thoughts a blur. The weight of Caroline's words was almost too much to bear. Ethan, her son's doppelganger, the child she had felt drawn to, was more than just a baby in her arms. He was tied to a legacy she didn't understand, to a family that had kept secrets buried for generations. And now, she was caught in the middle, with no way of knowing whether this knowledge would save her or destroy her. "I don't know what to do," Samantha said, her voice shaky. "I don't know if I can help him with this. I don't want him to be part of whatever darkness you're talking about. I want him to have a chance at a normal life. I want to protect him, not turn him into some weapon for your family." Caroline looked at her with a mixture of pity and resolve. "You have a choice, Samantha. You always have. But the truth is, Ethan is already part of something much bigger than both of us. He's tied to the Winters family legacy whether we like it or not. And if you want to help him, if you want to keep him safe, you'll have to make the hardest decision of your life." Samantha took a deep breath, her mind spinning. She looked down at Ethan, his small hand reaching out for her, his innocent eyes trusting her completely. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever decision she made, it would change everything. For Ethan, for her, for the Winters family. There was no going back from this. And yet, there was no way she could turn away. The pull toward Ethan was too strong. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "I'll protect him. I'll help him find out who he is, but I'm not going to let him become a tool for your family. He's a person, Caroline, not a weapon." Caroline nodded, her face hardening with a sense of resolve. "I never said it would be easy, but you've made your choice. And now, we have to face the consequences." Samantha held Ethan tightly in her arms once more, as the weight of the legacy he carried began to settle in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she would stand by Ethan, no matter what. Together, they would face the truth, and she would fight for him, for his future, and for the chance to rewrite the Winters family's dark legacy. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Samantha was no longer just a mother fighting for her child. She was now part of something much larger, and there was no turning back. The hidden truth. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier after Samantha made her decision. The words had barely left her mouth when she realized the enormity of what she had just promised. She had committed herself to helping Ethan, but she didn't truly understand what that meant, what kind of path she had just set them on. Caroline's gaze never wavered as she observed Samantha, the weight of their conversation settling around them like a thick fog. Samantha could sense the unease in the room, the knowledge that once the truth about Ethan's lineage came to light, there would be no turning back. What would this mean for her life, her safety, and the safety of the little boy in her arms? "Good," Caroline said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll need all the strength you have, Samantha. The road ahead won't be easy, but now you understand. You're in this, whether you want to be or not. The family's secrets are not just secrets. They're a force." Samantha didn't respond right away. Her mind was consumed with the enormity of the revelation. Ethan wasn't just any child. He was connected to a legacy older than her or anyone could understand. As Caroline had said, the family's power wasn't just built on wealth or influence. It was something much darker, something ancient. The thought of Ethan being the key to unlocking that power terrified her, but her maternal instincts screamed that she had to protect him, no matter the cost. "Tell me more," Samantha said, her voice steady now, despite the fear creeping up her spine. "What is this legacy? Why does it have to be him? Why does he look like David?" Caroline looked away, her eyes clouded with the burden of years of guilt. She swallowed hard before turning back to Samantha. "I can't tell you everything, not yet. But I can tell you this. Ethan is the heir to a power that goes back centuries. The Winters family is part of a line of people who were chosen to protect something ancient, something that has been guarded for generations. And Eliza, she knew. She knew Ethan was the one who would have to carry that weight." Samantha felt the pieces of the puzzle start to click into place, but there were still so many gaps. Something ancient? Something guarded for generations? What could that possibly mean? And why was David's image tied to Ethan in a way that felt almost supernatural? Her son had been taken too soon, but to now be faced with the idea that Ethan was somehow connected to that loss, it was almost too much to comprehend. "Chosen?" Samantha repeated, her mind racing. "To do what? What is it that Ethan has to protect?" Caroline hesitated again, her fingers trembling as she clasped her hands together. "I don't know the full truth, Samantha, but I know that whatever it is, it's tied to the legacy of the Winters family. And Eliza, she tried to keep Ethan away from it. She wanted him to have a normal life, but she couldn't protect him forever." Samantha could feel the weight of Caroline's words like a heavy stone pressing down on her chest. She had to get to the heart of this. She had to understand what Ethan represented. The truth wasn't just something about the family or its history, it was about Ethan. It was about his future. And somehow, it was about her son, David. "If he's so important," Samantha said, her voice hardening with determination, "then why did you hide him away? Why did you let me come in and just find him? Why didn't you prepare me for any of this?" Caroline looked away, shame flickering in her eyes. "We didn't know you would be the one to find him," she said quietly. "The family's kept its distance from the outside world for a reason. We didn't want anyone, especially someone with a connection to Eliza and David, to come looking for answers. But you, Samantha, you're already too close, too connected. Ethan's presence here, in this house, is not a coincidence. And neither is the fact that you're the one who's been drawn to him." Samantha's heart skipped a beat. The realization hit her like a wave crashing against rocks. She had been drawn to him. It wasn't just fate or coincidence. She had been connected to him, perhaps in ways that she didn't fully understand yet. But there was something more to it. Something that tied her to the Winters family, to Ethan, and to the secret they had all tried to bury. "I need to know the rest of it," Samantha said, her voice sharp now, with urgency. "I need to understand what's at stake here. I can't protect Ethan unless I know the truth. I can't protect him from the legacy you've been hiding if I don't know what it is." Caroline hesitated, looking as though she was struggling with her decision. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke. "All right," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'll tell you everything I know. But you have to promise me, Samantha. You have to promise me that you'll be ready for what comes next. Once you know the truth, there's no going back. This family has made its choice, and now you're a part of it, whether you like it or not." Samantha nodded, determination flooding her veins. "I'm ready. Tell me what I need to know." Caroline's face grew pale as she spoke the words that would change everything. "The Winters family," she began, "has been guarding an ancient power for centuries. It's not just wealth or influence. It's the power to control certain forces. Forces that have been passed down through generations. And Ethan, he's the key. The Winters bloodline carries within it the ability to harness and unlock that power. But it's not a power that can be controlled easily. It has a mind of its own. And when it awakens in Ethan, he won't be the same. He'll be drawn into it. He won't be able to escape it." Samantha felt a cold chill wash over her as Caroline's words sank in. The truth, whatever it was darker than she had ever imagined. But she couldn't stop now. She had made a promise to protect Ethan, and she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. She looked down at Ethan, his small face full of innocence, unaware of the darkness that loomed over him. Samantha's heart ached for him, for all of them. And now, more than ever, she knew that the path ahead would not be easy. But she couldn't stop, not now, not when the truth was finally within her grasp. The awakening. Samantha's mind was still reeling from Caroline's revelation. The power that Ethan carried within him, the legacy of the Winters family. It was more than just a dark secret. It was something that could change the course of history. She had always felt a connection to Ethan, something primal. But now she knew that connection ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. He wasn't just a baby. He was the key to something much larger, and Samantha was terrified of what that meant. Caroline's words echoed in her ears, repeating like a mantra. Ethan will be drawn into it. He won't be able to escape it. Samantha shuddered at the thought. This child, this innocent little boy, was bound to a destiny that she could barely begin to understand. How could she protect him from a power that was so ancient, so uncontrollable? How could she fight a legacy that had been built over centuries? Samantha glanced down at Ethan, his tiny hand wrapped around her finger, his brown eyes staring up at her with a mixture of trust and wonder. He had no idea what he was about to face. He didn't know what he was capable of. He was just a child. And yet, in that moment, Samantha understood something deeply. He had the potential to change everything, for better or worse. She wasn't sure how much more Caroline was willing to reveal, but Samantha knew that she had to find out everything, no matter the cost. She couldn't let Ethan face this legacy alone. She couldn't let him fall into the trap that had ensnared his family for generations. "We have to stop it," Samantha said quietly, more to herself than to Caroline. She turned to face Caroline, her eyes burning with determination. "We have to stop this legacy from consuming him. If what you say is true, then we can't let Ethan become a part of that darkness." Caroline looked at her, her face unreadable. "I don't know if we can," she replied softly. "The power is inside of him, Samantha. It's been passed down through the Winters bloodline for centuries. It's not something you can simply erase. It's a part of who he is. And when it awakens, he won't have any control over it." Samantha clenched her fists. She wasn't going to let that happen. She wouldn't let Ethan become a pawn in a legacy he didn't ask for, a legacy that could destroy him. She didn't know how yet, but she was going to fight for him, no matter what it took. "Then we'll fight," she said firmly, her voice full of resolve. "We'll fight to protect him. We'll find a way to stop it." Caroline's eyes softened, a mixture of sadness and pity in her gaze. "I admire your strength, Samantha, but I've seen the consequences of trying to fight this power. You don't know what it's like to see it take over someone you love. I don't want you to go through that. I don't want Ethan to suffer the way my family has." Samantha's heart ached as she looked at Caroline. She could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of the secrets she had carried for so long. Caroline had been a part of this legacy, had seen the toll it took on those who tried to fight it. But Samantha couldn't back down. She couldn't let Ethan's life be defined by a dark legacy. She had to protect him, even if it meant going up against the very thing that had controlled this family for centuries. "I don't care about the legacy," Samantha said, her voice steady. "I care about Ethan, and I'm not going to let him become a part of something that will destroy him." Caroline's expression faltered for a moment, as though she was wrestling with a decision. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet and resigned. "I don't think you fully understand what you're up against," Caroline said. "But I'm not going to stop you. You're right. Ethan deserves a chance to live his own life. He deserves a chance at something better than what this family has offered him." Samantha's heart surged with relief, but the fear in the back of her mind still lingered. She was about to embark on a path she couldn't predict, one that could lead to danger she couldn't fathom. But for Ethan, she was willing to face anything. "We need to find out more," Samantha said, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to know what this legacy is, how it works, and how we can stop it from taking him. I'll do whatever it takes." Caroline nodded slowly. "There are people who know more about this than I do, people who have been involved with the Winters family for generations. You'll need to find them. They might have the answers you're looking for." Samantha's stomach twisted at the thought of seeking out more people involved in this twisted legacy. But she knew Caroline was right. She couldn't do this alone. And if there were others who knew more about the power Ethan was destined to carry, then she would find them. She would do whatever it took to save him. "Where do I find them?" Samantha asked, her voice urgent. Caroline hesitated, as if weighing the risks of revealing this information. Finally, she spoke. "There's a place. A hidden location connected to the Winters family. It's a private estate, far from the public eye. Only a few people know about it, but it's where the answers are. It's where the legacy began." Samantha nodded, her heart racing. She didn't know what she would find there or what dangers lay ahead, but she couldn't back down. Ethan's future depended on it. "Take me there," Samantha said, her voice filled with determination. "I'll find a way to stop this. I won't let him become a part of something that could destroy him." Caroline gave her a long, hard look, as if she were considering the consequences of helping her. But then, with a small, resigned nod, she turned toward the door. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll take you. But remember, Samantha, this isn't just about Ethan anymore. It's about everything. The Winters family, the power, and you." Samantha's heart skipped a beat as she followed Caroline out of the room. She had no idea what she was about to face, but one thing was clear. The truth was within her reach, and she would stop at nothing to protect Ethan from the legacy that had already claimed so many lives before him. She was ready. Into the unknown. The drive to the hidden estate felt like a journey into another world. The road was long and winding, taking them through thick forests and over narrow, winding paths. Samantha sat in the back seat of the car, Ethan sleeping peacefully in her arms, his little body cradled close to her chest. Caroline, who drove in silence, seemed lost in her own thoughts, her face unreadable. The weight of what they were about to face hung heavy in the air between them. Samantha's mind was spinning. She had promised to protect Ethan, to help him find his way, but the more she learned, the more the situation seemed impossible. She couldn't even fathom the depths of the Winters family's legacy, much less the ancient power Caroline had spoken of. She felt like she was walking blindfolded through a maze with no way out, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close to uncovering the truth. The estate Caroline had mentioned was miles away from the nearest town. The secluded location made it seem like a place where no one could reach them, hidden away from the world. It wasn't until they reached the gates, high and imposing, that Samantha felt a chill creep up her spine. The gates themselves seemed to exude an ancient aura, an impenetrable barrier that had been standing for centuries. This was where it all began. This was where the Winters family had kept their secrets, hidden away from the world. Caroline parked the car and got out, her movements stiff, like someone who had visited this place far too many times but could never truly escape it. Samantha followed, her heart pounding in her chest. The massive, crumbling estate loomed before them, an eerie mansion that seemed to hold the weight of centuries of history. It stood alone, isolated from the rest of the world, as if it were a relic from another time. The air around it felt thick with silence, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Are you sure about this?" Caroline asked, turning to face Samantha. Her voice was soft, but there was a sense of finality in it. "Once we go in there, there's no turning back. You'll have to face the truth, and it may not be what you want to hear." Samantha looked down at Ethan, his small face peaceful in her arms. She had to do this, for him, for David, for herself. No more secrets. She nodded firmly, despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I'm ready. We have to know the truth. I'm not going to let Ethan grow up without understanding who he really is." Caroline's face softened for a moment, her own pain flickering behind her eyes. "I never wanted you to be part of this," she murmured. "But now, we don't have a choice. The family has always kept its secrets, but they've started to slip, and now, it's all falling apart." Together, they walked toward the grand entrance of the mansion. The wooden doors were massive, ancient-looking, with intricate carvings that told stories of a past long forgotten. Samantha's pulse quickened as she reached for the handle, knowing that what awaited them inside would change everything. As the doors creaked open, a chill swept through the room, and the smell of dust and old wood filled Samantha's senses. The grand foyer was dimly lit, with tall windows allowing only a few beams of sunlight to creep in, casting long shadows across the floor. The walls were lined with portraits of people from another era, staring down at them with cold, impassive eyes. Samantha shuddered as she stepped inside, the weight of the house pressing in on her. Caroline led the way through the maze of dark corridors, past rooms filled with antique furniture and faded tapestries, as though the mansion itself had been frozen in time. Every corner seemed to hold secrets, every room a memory of a past that no one wanted to remember. Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the house itself was alive, its walls whispering stories of things better left forgotten. After what felt like an eternity, Caroline stopped in front of a large, ornate door. It was the only door in the entire mansion that looked new, untouched by the passage of time. The door was made of heavy oak, with gold fixtures, and a keyhole that seemed to beckon them in. Caroline took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the door handle. "This is it," Caroline said quietly, her voice filled with both dread and resolve. "This is where the truth lies. Behind this door is where everything started. This is where the Winters family's legacy was born, and this is where you'll finally understand everything about Ethan. Samantha's heart raced as she stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when everything would finally make sense. But the closer she got to the door, the more she felt the chill of something ancient and powerful radiating from within. It was as though the room behind the door had been sealed for a reason she wasn't sure she was ready to understand. Caroline turned to Samantha, her eyes filled with an emotion Samantha couldn't place. Once you open that door, there's no turning back. What you see inside might change everything you thought you knew about Ethan, about your son, and about the legacy that binds them together. Are you sure you're ready for this? Samantha glanced down at Ethan, still sleeping in her arms, unaware of the weight of the moment. She felt her heart tighten with both fear and love. No matter what she found behind that door, she knew one thing for certain. She had to protect him. She had to fight for him, no matter the cost. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, though the storm inside her was far from calm. "We have to know the truth." Caroline nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a sadness that spoke volumes. With a final, hesitant glance at Samantha, she opened the door. The room beyond was unlike anything Samantha had ever seen. It was vast, the walls lined with old books and artifacts, the air thick with the smell of ancient parchment. But what caught her attention the most was the center of the room, a large, intricately carved stone pedestal. On it, there was a small object, a relic of some kind. It glowed faintly in the dim light, casting an eerie, otherworldly glow across the room. Samantha stepped forward, her body tense with anticipation. What was this object? What did it have to do with Ethan's legacy? And most importantly, what did it mean for her son? Caroline's voice broke through her thoughts. "This is the key," she said softly. "The key to everything. The Winters family's true power. And Ethan, he's the one who will unlock it." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Ethan. The truth was closer than ever, but with it came a darkness that she hadn't fully anticipated. The awakening of power. The room felt colder now, as if the weight of centuries was pressing down on Samantha's shoulders. The glow from the object on the pedestal illuminated the room in a soft, eerie light, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and curl around the stone walls. Samantha's heart raced, the tension in the air palpable. This was the moment when everything would change. The key to the Winters family's power lay right in front of her, and the realization hit her like a wave. This was what Ethan was meant to unlock. This relic, whatever it was, held the answers she'd been searching for. But as her eyes fell upon it, a sense of unease gripped her. It wasn't just the relic that made her feel this way. It was everything in this room. It was as though the space itself was alive, humming with an energy that was as old as time itself. The very air seemed charged, and as she moved closer to the pedestal, she couldn't help but feel as though she were walking into a trap. Caroline stepped beside her, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Perhaps fear, perhaps regret. She stood quietly, her gaze fixed on the relic. "This is it," Caroline whispered, almost as if speaking to herself. "This is what the family has protected for so long. This is what Ethan will one day awaken within himself." Samantha could feel the weight of Caroline's words, but they were still vague, mysterious. She didn't know what to think. She couldn't just look at the object and believe that it was the key to everything. The power that Caroline spoke of, it seemed unreal, like something out of a myth. She had no idea what it was or how it had come to be in the possession of the Winters family. Is this what you meant when you said Ethan is the heir to something bigger?" Samantha asked, her voice steady but trembling with fear. "What is this thing? What does it do? Why does Ethan have to be the one to unlock it?" Caroline's eyes softened as she turned to face Samantha. It's not just about power. It's about control. The Winters family has always had the ability to control forces that no one else can. This relic, it's the source of that power. Ethan is meant to harness it. He has the bloodline to do so. Samantha felt a cold chill crawl up her spine. Control forces? What kind of forces? This is too much, Caroline. I can't just accept that this little boy, my son, or whatever he is, has this kind of responsibility. You're asking me to believe in something I can't even begin to understand. Caroline's face was pale, but she didn't flinch. I know it's hard to understand. I didn't want to believe it either at first. But the truth is, Ethan has been born into this legacy. There's no way to change it. It's his destiny. Samantha's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to scream, to run, to grab Ethan and leave this place. But she couldn't. She couldn't just walk away from this. The answers were too close. The power, the truth, she could almost taste it. And somehow, she knew that Ethan was the key. But how? How could he be the one to awaken this force? And what did it mean for him? For her? I didn't sign up for this, Samantha muttered under her breath, her eyes focused on the relic. I didn't ask for this legacy. But I'll be damned if I let him fall into this trap. Caroline's face softened, and she placed a hand gently on Samantha's shoulder. I know. But there's nothing you can do to change it now. All you can do is protect him. Help him find a way to control this power before it consumes him. Before it consumes all of us. The gravity of her words hit Samantha like a punch to the stomach. It consumes him? What did that mean? How could a child, her child, be expected to control something like that? And if he couldn't, what would happen to him? What would happen to her? Samantha's heart tightened in her chest as she turned her attention back to the glowing relic. There was something almost hypnotic about it. Something about the way it pulsed with energy that made her feel as though she were being drawn in against her will. Was it calling to Ethan? Or was it calling to her too? She swallowed hard, her mind whirling with thoughts and fears. What happens when he awakens the power? What will happen to him? Caroline's face darkened, and for the first time Samantha saw a flicker of true fear in her eyes. He'll change. The power will consume him if he isn't prepared. That's why Eliza left. She didn't want him to become like the others. She wanted to protect him from this, from the fate that awaits him. The truth was like a knife to Samantha's heart. Eliza had known. She had known what Ethan was meant for, what was inside of him, and she had done everything she could to shield him from it. But now, that was no longer possible. Now, it was Samantha's turn to protect him. Samantha's hand clenched around Ethan's tiny fingers, feeling the warmth of his skin. She didn't know how she was going to do it, how she could possibly stop something as ancient and powerful as this from taking over her son. But she would figure it out. She had to. I won't let this happen to him, Samantha whispered fiercely. I'll find a way to stop it. I'll protect him from this power, from whatever the Winters family has been hiding for centuries. Caroline's gaze was somber, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of resignation. You can't protect him from everything, Samantha. The power is inside him. It's not something you can lock away. But maybe you can help him learn to control it. Maybe together, you can stop it from consuming him. Samantha looked down at Ethan, the weight of what lay ahead pressing heavily on her chest. He was just a child. He shouldn't have to bear the burden of something so terrifying, something so dangerous. But as she held him in her arms, she made a silent promise. She would fight for him. She would find a way to keep him safe. And no matter what it took, she would make sure that the Winters family's legacy would not destroy him. She turned away from the pedestal and walked toward the door. Caroline followed her, the silence between them heavier than ever. But as Samantha stepped out of the room and into the cold, dark hallways of the estate, she knew one thing for certain. The battle was just beginning. And she would do whatever it took to protect Ethan and to stop the legacy of the Winters family from consuming them all. The awakening. Samantha didn't know how much time had passed as they left the estate behind. The air had shifted, becoming thicker and heavier as though the mansion itself had been watching them, waiting for them to return. Caroline led the way, her steps hurried, but she didn't dare look back. Samantha, holding Ethan tightly in her arms, felt a growing sense of urgency building within her. The relic, the ancient power tied to the Winters family. It wasn't just history anymore. It was something real, something that was coming for them, for Ethan. And she had no idea how to stop it. The drive back to the mansion felt like a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. The landscape blurred as Samantha stared out of the window, her thoughts consumed by the events that had just unfolded. The relic was calling to her, calling to Ethan. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something inside of him waiting to awaken. Caroline had been right. Ethan was connected to something far beyond what they could control. And if he didn't learn to control it, the power could destroy him, or worse, destroy them all. But there was still a chance. There had to be. When they finally reached the mansion, Samantha didn't wait for Caroline to open the door. She stepped out of the car and walked quickly toward the house, feeling the cold air bite at her skin. The mansion seemed almost alive with its own energy, the windows reflecting the soft light of the moon. It was as if the house itself knew that something had changed, that the events they had set in motion were irreversible. Inside, the mansion was as quiet as ever. The silence was oppressive, almost suffocating. But this time, it felt different. The house didn't feel like a place to hide secrets anymore. It felt like a place where those secrets were about to be revealed. Caroline stood at the foot of the stairs, her eyes dark with the weight of what had just happened. "We can't let Ethan stay here, Samantha. Not like this. We need to leave. We need to get out of this place before it's too late." Samantha's chest tightened at Caroline's words. The urgency in her voice, the fear. It was real. She knew Caroline was right, but how could she leave? This mansion was the center of it all. The answers they were searching for, the truth about Ethan, about the Winters family. It was all here, buried beneath layers of time and deception. And it wasn't just about the power anymore. It was about her son, about the boy she had promised to protect, no matter the cost. "I'm not leaving," Samantha said firmly, her voice sharp with determination. "I won't run away from this. I need to understand what's happening. I need to know what I'm dealing with before we make any decisions. Ethan's future depends on it." Caroline opened her mouth to argue, but she stopped herself, her gaze falling on Ethan. She seemed to hesitate for a moment before nodding slowly. "I understand. But be careful, Samantha. The longer you stay here, the harder it will be to keep him safe. The power is already inside of him, and I'm not sure he even realizes what it's capable of." Samantha's heart ached as she looked down at Ethan, his tiny face peaceful and innocent as he slept in her arms. He didn't deserve any of this. He didn't deserve to be born into a legacy of power and darkness, a legacy that had already claimed so many lives. But he was her son now, whether by blood or fate, and she would do whatever it took to protect him. "I'll protect him," Samantha said, more to herself than to Caroline. "I don't know how yet, but I will." Caroline gave her a long, knowing look before walking toward the study. "There's one more place we need to visit," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's where the answers are. If we're going to stop this, we need to find out more about what Ethan's really capable of. We need to understand the full extent of the power inside him." Samantha followed Caroline silently, the weight of her words pressing heavily on her chest. They reached a door at the end of a narrow hallway, one Samantha had never noticed before. It was an old wooden door, the kind that seemed to be locked away for a reason. Caroline hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the doorknob. "This is where it all started," Caroline said quietly. "This is where the Winters family's legacy began, and where it might end." With a slow turn of the knob, the door creaked open, revealing a dark room filled with dusty old bookshelves and ancient artifacts. The air inside was thick with the smell of old leather and parchment, the atmosphere heavy with a sense of history. But it wasn't just the room that made Samantha's breath catch in her throat. It was the object in the center of the room. On a pedestal, bathed in the dim light from the small window above, was a large, intricately carved box. It looked ancient, like something that had been preserved for centuries, untouched by time. Samantha could feel the power emanating from it, a palpable force that made her pulse quicken. Caroline walked toward the box, her footsteps slow and deliberate. "This is the key," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This box holds the answers. It holds everything you need to understand about Ethan's power, about what he's capable of." Samantha's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of what was about to happen. This was it, the truth, the key to everything. "What is it?" Samantha asked, her voice barely a whisper. Caroline paused, her fingers hovering over the box. "It's the source, the Winters family's true legacy, the power that we've been guarding, the power that Ethan was born to awaken." Samantha's mind raced as she looked at the box, the weight of everything finally sinking in. This wasn't just about protecting Ethan anymore. It was about understanding what he was meant to do, about the power he was destined to control, and the consequences of unleashing it. She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around Ethan. No matter what it was, she couldn't back down. Not now, not when the truth was right in front of her. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered, more to herself than to Caroline. "I'll protect him. I'll stop this, no matter what it costs." With a deep breath, Caroline opened the box, and the truth they had been searching for was about to reveal itself. The story of Samantha and Ethan carries powerful lessons about destiny, responsibility, and the fight for what is right. At its core, the narrative emphasizes the importance of confronting the unknown, no matter how overwhelming or frightening it may seem. Samantha's journey reflects the universal struggle of protecting those we love, especially when faced with forces beyond our control. It teaches us that, while we may not be able to control our past or the legacy we inherit, we can still shape our future by the choices we make. In life, we are often faced with challenges that seem insurmountable, forces that push us to our limits. However, the story reminds us that courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. It's about standing firm in the face of uncertainty and acting in alignment with our values. Just as Samantha fights to protect Ethan, we too must stand up for what we believe in, even when the path forward is unclear. In doing so, we discover not only our strength, but our purpose in a world that often feels chaotic and out of control. Protecting what we love and striving for a better future begins with one brave step, no matter how uncertain the journey may be. And so, after everything she had gone through, Samantha stood there, holding the child that seemed to have come from a time she thought was lost forever. The past, the grief, and the unanswered questions all faded away, replaced by a quiet certainty. Life, with its unpredictable twists, had brought her this unexpected chance to heal, to rediscover love in a way she didn't think was possible. Sometimes we think we've reached the end of the road, but life has a funny way of showing us that there's always another chapter waiting. And though the answers Samantha sought were not easy to find, they led her to a deeper understanding of love, loss, and the power of second chances. As you sit there watching this, know that no matter where you are in your journey, there is always hope. Just like Samantha, we all have the strength to rise from the ashes and embrace the unknown. So, take heart, keep going, and when the time comes, the answers will find you. Remember to like, subscribe to Stories TH, and share where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story and how it made you feel. Take care, and until next time.